Hey guys, Dr. Mike Israetel here for Renaissance Periodization and Juggernaut Training Systems. I'm going to be talking a little bit with you today about a topic that's really prevalent kind of all the time, and it keeps resurfacing. And there's a lot of really big confusion on this topic. And I was hoping just to kind of have an informal chat with you guys to maybe shed some light. So the topic is genetically modified foods. And GMO stands for genetically modified organisms, but it's almost always used in the context of food nowadays. There's this idea that genetically modified foods are bad for health. Somehow they're dangerous, they're poisonous in some way, maybe we're allergic to them, they weren't designed for us in nature, and thus they're bad and should be avoided. The reality of the matter is that can't really be further from the truth. And this is one of those things that we rely on this idea of the naturalistic fallacy that if something is natural, it must be pretty good for us. If something's artificial, it must be pretty bad. That is a fallacy. It's a formal academic fallacy. If you use it in a debate, in a formal judge debate, you will be judged negatively. It's just not a dependable way of thinking about the world. Because there are a lot of artificial things that are really good, a lot of natural things that are really bad. So using this kind of background that the naturalistic fallacy is maybe not the greatest thing to go on, let's take a look at some of the point-by-point ideas about genetically modified foods and their potential dangers and see if we can examine them a little bit. So first point is that people say, the corn that gets produced on U.S. farms, maybe it was produced in the 50s, 60s, 70s, that's natural corn. I eat that stuff, corn growing on the farm. And I don't mess with that new genetically modified stuff. It's got all kinds of weird, additions and all kinds of alterations. And they figure that because, this new sciencey way of doing things could, cause health problems, it's not tested, etc. Well, that's already an illusion. And as many people have pointed out before me, almost every single farmed product or good that we eat today has a several thousand-year history of artificial selection, of humans selecting certain kinds of corn, the kind that grows the biggest, the kind that maybe needs to be watered the least, the kind that makes the most actual big juicy kernels. They've been selecting those plants and allowing them to breed more than plants that have maybe a little dinky corn and too dry of corn and they're maybe too sensitive to the light or require a whole lot of water. That process has been going on with whatever cultures have been involved in farming for thousands of years. It's been going on for thousands of years. So we've been altering foods, we've been modifying them, and when you push selective breeding, you are engaging in genetic modification. Is it the same as going in with a fine instrument and putting in one gene and taking out another? It's not the same, but the result of different genes involved is very, very much the same. So if you're really claiming that, food has to be natural. Natural is a good thing. We'll get to that in a second. The food we're eating today has been excessively modified by humans, even if it's not at the modern technology's GMO level. So already we're facing some problems here. Point number 2, and here's the really big one. We could stop after this, but we'll beat it to death afterwards just to make sure. The idea that genetically modified foods are worse for human health is strictly made up. It's a literal make-believe. The amount of evidence that for sure, good, reliable, repeatable evidence that genetically modified foods cause any kind of maladies over natural foods simply does not exist. It's not there. Good luck looking for it. I wish you luck. If you find any, let me know, because I have done a whole lot of research on the subject and I've missed it. Most of the world's best food scientists will flat out tell you there is no evidence that genetically modified foods are bad for health. And some people come back with the idea that, well, there's good reason to believe they might be. We'll tackle that in a bit. But some people say, well, they're super new. Of course they haven't manifested themselves. Genetic modification in that particular new modern way of gene and deletion and insertion has been practiced in some form or another now for coming up on more than 20 years, for sure, in large, massive, sort of industrially produced farm products. Man, if something doesn't come up after 20 years and there's no evidence that it's harmful, is it possible that it is still going to be discovered harmful later, maybe a next generation mutation rate or something? Yes, but that's starting to really diminish after 20 years of just no data, right? Similar analogy in, tell someone that a car that they bought, that kind of brand of car tends to break down a lot. And after you drive the car around for 5 years and it's never broken once, you start to think maybe you'll just have a massive breakdown after year 6, and that person could still be right. But man, 5 years of no breakdowns at all, that's starting to look pretty good. So we can't really rely on that idea, oh, they're super new. They're not super new. That's the thing. And every year that goes on and there's no problems is another year tacked away from that argument that genetically modified foods are inherently bad. So let's get to that argument really quick in point number 3. The idea is natural foods, we somehow have evolved around them. And maybe even if we're not taking the very naive view that evolution works in our favor for us, evolving random plants and animals around to benefit us, which it absolutely doesn't, let's say that we at least have been exposed to these natural fruits and vegetables that we eat, and our organisms have, our own bodies have developed an ability to not become sick from them, developed a tolerance at least. Well, that's a fine idea. And a lot of the proponents of that are anti-genetically modified foods seem to believe that. And these same proponents, you can follow them away from whichever offices or desks they're sitting at to make these claims, maybe online, maybe in videos, maybe when they write books. And after that, they'll go over and get if they're in Southern California perhaps, they'll get a delicious bowl called an acai bowl, right? And the acai bowl is made of acai berries that are imported probably from the south, somewhere in South America, probably from Brazil. And maybe they'll eat avocado or guava, or just some of these are very, very common foods, and they'll never bat an eye at it. And if these people are of African, Asian, or European ancestry, anything but South American ancestry, they are probably in the first generation of people eating that kind of food. There are molecular compounds, hundreds of them, in all of those foods from South America, which if you're of European ancestry and you eat, you've never been exposed to any of that stuff, and none of your ancestors have. Maybe your mom has, but she probably tried her first guava after she gave birth to you, in 1992 or something like that. So to say, wait a minute, genetically modified foods have all these new weird ingredients, and they're definitely bad, but to eat guava or to eat avocado or to eat acai berries and say, oh, it's totally fine. They're not evolved for you and you're not evolved for them. You wouldn't go on a mission to a new planet and see all these weird trees with super crazy fruit and start picking them off and going, hey, nature made these, it's great, and start eating them. I sure hope you wouldn't. You wouldn't go to an Indonesian jungle on a tour and start eating berries randomly off the street or, just randomly out of the jungle. That's probably a bad idea. So why would you eat avocados and guava and all this other stuff? And you can say, well, the South American natives, they've been eating them and they're fine, but you're not genetically exactly like them. At least they can say they've co-evolved with those fruits for a while. Their ancestors have been eating them for hundreds or thousands of years. You can't say that same thing about yourself unless you're of South American ancestry. And if you're of South American ancestry, you got the opposite problem for foods that have been imported from North America or even Europe or Asia, right? So it gets to be a problematic concern when you say, well, these natural foods were evolved with. Locally, your own genetics, you've probably been exposed, your ancestors, to a very limited stream of foods. Most of the world's foods, because of our very new global economy last 50 years, you're being exposed to for the first time. So if you're really concerned about genetically modified foods, you had better be at least as concerned with foods you're eating that are exotic in nature and your own ancestors haven't been exposed to. Brings us to our next point. Genetically modified foods are designed, before they're ever designed, they are thought through incredibly well by some of the smartest food scientists, by some of the smartest people of all time. They're meticulously engineered and planned. They are designed with incredible care. They are tested on a wide variety of organisms through a wide variety of conditions. They are tested in laboratories on humans far before you are exposed to them in almost every case. They are produced by companies who have incredibly selfish interests to not make a poison. If you're an executive of a food company and it comes out that the main food you're manufacturing, turns out you didn't research it enough and it's killing people or it's degrading their health in some way, you might as well just fire yourself because you're done. That would be terrible, and no company executive wants that. Are there get-rich-quick schemes in various companies in the market? Some. Are giant agro-businesses get-rich-quick schemes? Man, most of these companies have been around for decades. They're not interested in going out of business tomorrow. They research everything incredibly closely, and also the amount of governmental oversight, the amount of regulatory oversight, FDA approval, etc. for these products is massive. Is there FDA approval for acai berries and guava and avocados for their design, not just their cleanliness? Of course not. We just kind of assume, oh yeah, other people have been eating them, they're fine. So we're saying that something that's been meticulously designed, exactly designed not to be harmful, is more likely to be harmful than something designed by the raw, brutal processes of self-interest in nature? Can we say that we got these things so right that they're almost always going to be better than nature? No, we don't want to get that cocky. But can we say that our attempt at incredibly industrious and incredibly precise decisions are always or mostly going to steer us wrong? Man, I don't think that's a very good argument. Right? So if you're willing to go with kind of more or less the random processes of nature versus the meticulous processes of laboratory design, you'd have to explain that really well, why that's a good idea. Lastly, we talk about, in many social circles, the idea of being open-minded. And oftentimes the very people who advocate against genetically modified foods say, like, paint a hippie picture here, but like, open your mind, man, right? And a lot of people, don't fit that mold, but they say, listen, be open-minded, look at all the evidence, maybe genetically modified foods are bad. That's a very, very great mindset. I say back to them and to everyone, be open-minded in both directions. Maybe it turns out genetically modified foods are just fine. I think they are, after examining a whole lot of the evidence. If you're not convinced, keep looking. An open mind is the way you get to the truth. If you're convinced for sure genetically modified foods are bad and you don't want to see any of this bullshit evidence these mega companies tearing down the world are making, that's probably not going to get you closest to the truth. Have an open mind, and I love honest discussion like this. If you have any comments about this video, please share them. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Give it some thought.